Look, we all know what Mario's about. It's polished to a ridiculous mirror sheen, it has wonderfully colorful visual direction and a fantastic varied soundtrack to match, and it's got that sweet Nintendo school of design going on, where it picked one big innovation and built everything around that central pillar. 80% of this review can be covered by just saying, yep, it's a Mario game, and it does all the things you'd expect a Mario game to do. But there is that one big central conceit to dig into, and in Bowser's Fury's case, the big innovation is an actually intimidating villain. Okay, digs at Bowser's general pushoverness aside, Nintendo tapped into their inner kaiju movie fan and made the King of the Koopas into a force that actually lives up to his title. An absolute titan that's more natural disaster than actual antagonist, as he dumps massive spikes all over the world and burninates half the countryside with a single god of flame. And Nintendo found a whole ton of great ways to build around this idea that we're going to be spending this review digging into, so strap in. As always, I'm Alex, and this is First 5, where I ask if games are worth your time, not your money. I played a game for 5 hours, and I'm gonna tell you if those were 5 hours well spent. And today, we're exploring Lake Lapcat in Bowser's Fury. I'll be honest, I very nearly let this one pass me by. Straight up classic platformers aren't usually my jam, and Mario's about as capital P platformy as they come. But everybody and their grandmother keeps telling me to cover it, so here we are. And I gotta say, I'm glad they did, because even as a Grinch with a deprived childhood almost entirely absent of platformers, I think Bowser's Fury fucking slaps. If you're not like me, and a normal person who does like Mario, you're probably gonna be pretty satisfied with this one regardless of everything else I've got to say. It basically feels like playing Odyssey minus the hat. But that doesn't mean there's nothing to talk about, because Nintendo went all out by making Bowser the biggest boy, and his presence is, depending on context, simultaneously the most and least interesting parts of the game. When Bowser periodically decides to drop in on you in the overworld, he is an absolute delight. He isn't just a pesky gimmick that gets old and you ignore after he shows up the first 2 or 3 times. If you don't account for Bowser's shenanigans, he will mess you up. And by the time you get to the end of the game, he's powered up enough that otherwise straightforward and simple challenges become genuinely difficult. Bowser's Fury is, in general, a pretty easy game that even a platforming smooth brain like me can clear with ease. But if you do want to make things hard for yourself, just let Bowser rampage, and you'll get what you're looking for. But Bowser doesn't just interact meaningfully with the player. What's really exciting is how he interacts with the environment. When Bowser decides to show up, literally everything in the game world gets recontextualized. Platforms become cover to hide behind from his flame breath. There are specific objectives you can only pull off when he's around, and whenever he shows up, he produces all new platforms that give you new routes through old levels. The way Bowser transformed the environment led to many of the game's best and most memorable moments. Take, for example, the time I was trying to climb up a very vertical level while he rained hellfire down on me. Or the time I had to somehow survive crossing an empty chasm devoid of cover while he leveled the entire valley with his fire breath. Or Trickety Tower. Trickety Tower is normally this invisible maze floating high above the ocean. You can only see the immediate few feet of platform around you, so you have to move slow and watch your step or you'll just slip off and have to start all over again. But all of a sudden, Bowser shows up and the level becomes very different. His spikes are everywhere, not just introducing all kinds of new routes and shortcuts, but also revealing half the maze and giving the player their first real view of the level's entire layout. Suddenly, you've gone from stumbling around in the dark to having practically an entire map layout in your head, and I found myself sprinting through the same space I've been crawling through moments earlier. Bowser's just as often inadvertently helpful as he is harmful, and he's even more fun when you're manipulating him to your ends than he is when you're just scrambling to survive. But I also said that he's sometimes pretty bland, and unfortunately, that's because Kaiju Bowser makes for a pretty underwhelming boss once it's actually time to cross fists. The game's basic rhythm is to introduce a few new levels, let you grab a bunch of cat shines while Bowser chases you around, and then eventually turn the tables and get into a big brawl with him. And that last part is a bit of an unfortunate letdown for what's otherwise supposed to be the climax of Bowser's Fury's core loop. Don't get me wrong, your bouts with Bowser are excellent little slices of sheer spectacle, but they're also over as quickly as they start. He always runs away after 2 hits, not even the usual 3 hits to win that's present for every other mini-boss in the game. I'm not asking for a Dark Souls boss fight here, but I also don't think I ever got into a brawl with Bowser that lasted longer than 2 minutes, and the moment just needs more room than that to breathe. 2 minutes seems to be a pretty consistent length across all of Bowser's Fury's different mechanical loops, though. Every 2 minutes, you're setting foot in a new zone, discovering a new mechanic, or completing one challenge or another to get a cat shine. This game isn't just short because the world map is small, it's short because it moves at a whirlwind pace. Seriously, after 5 hours, I've already managed to collect 87 of this game's stars, which feels absolutely bonkers. So while this breakneck pace doesn't serve the boss fights well, it does serve everything else in the game much better. If you're one of those guys who needs every moon to be a meaningful challenge, you'll probably roll your eyes as you rack up a new cat shine practically every 20 feet, but I don't think there was a single wasted moment in the entire time I played. Every island is its own unique twist that doesn't ever go outside its boundaries, so very few mechanics ever repeat or get old. There was always something immediate to do, and I was rarely uninterested in doing it. And if there somehow wasn't something immediate to do, I've got this guy to bring me somewhere new 30 seconds away to go do something there instead. Which brings us to Bowser's Fury's open world. There are 2 things I really dig about what Nintendo did with Bowser's Fury's world. One, that there are races freaking everywhere. You got time trials, you got blue coin races, you got multiple ways to race around on Plessy. These things have always existed in Mario, but they make up a much larger slice of the activities compared to actual platforming challenges that I'm used to, and they're used to frequently put you around the open world and make you go explore different activities elsewhere. In general, actually, Bowser's Fury has surprisingly few quote-unquote classic platforming challenges. More often you'll be sliding down a racetrack in a giant ice skate, or messing around with something weird like Trickety Tower, or in a level it's entirely about navigating different tubes, to mention just a few of Bowser's Fury's more brilliant and creative ideas. And these islands come at you fast. Like, you're engaging with new islands every 10 minutes, well before the original islands have time to get old. And most brilliantly, those original islands are always evolving when you're not looking. Walk away for 10 minutes to go mess around somewhere else, and you'll come back to an island to find its layout has changed. This is partially because a lot of these islands are too small to reasonably contain 5 cat shines without basically getting remade into new maps, but looking at it from the opposite direction, one could also say that it's not enough for all of these islands to have their own unique and wildly different ideas. Nintendo also decided they had to evolve and iterate on them. Thought this level that had you traveling through tubes was cool? Now go do it, but you can't use any of the tubes and you have to navigate the level completely differently. Like the ice skate race? Now try going back uphill on foot. Had a lot of fun doing this level with all these bouncy pads? Now do it while there are bullet bills everywhere. This all leads to a really neat dynamic. Between this and the races that often take you halfway across the map, you rarely just sit down at an island and bang out its 5 cat shines all in a row. Instead, the game heavily encourages you to be constantly running around its map, sampling different islands repeatedly as they evolve. And thanks to Plessy, your sentient all-terrain jet ski, getting around the open world is easier than hitting a fast travel button. See, you think I'm joking when I say that, but I'm not. Because you eventually do unlock fast travel, and I've never once bothered to use it. But alright, this review is running long, so we have to get to the big question. What do you get out of 5 hours with Bowser's Fury? The answer is virtually everything. In 5 hours, I not only beat the game and saw the credits, but I've also finished almost all of the bonus challenges and nearly 100%ed it. And not only is it short, it is also so incredibly dense. I have already said plenty and more about how dense and fast-paced an experience Bowser's Fury is, so this shouldn't be much of a shock. But this is a phenomenal game for the time-strapped player that never lets up from the moment it starts. Repeatedly, I've come back to the idea of recontextualizing familiar spaces in Bowser's Fury, and I think that this constant recontextualization is the game's true strength. Whether it's levels evolving as you complete more and more challenges in them, or the entire landscape being transformed when Bowser's rampaging around, this game is at its best when it's recontextualizing these places, gently nudging you to find new routes through its levels, and asking you to look at them with fresh eyes to complete new challenges. Bowser's Fury's world is an ever-evolving funhouse where something new and exciting is always just over the horizon, and it's one of the best uses of open-world design I've seen in a long time. It's probably the most fun I've ever had with a Mario game, and that might not be saying much coming from someone who's an absolute Mario Grinch, but if even I'm in love with it, I can only imagine how much anyone else would be. And if you enjoyed this review as much as I like Bowser's Fury, consider supporting me on Patreon. With your generous support, I can start doing all kinds of cool stuff like more in-depth video essays and 5-hour streams where I review games like this in real time. So if any of that sounds cool, please consider becoming a patron today. But I hope you enjoyed this first 5 review. Thanks for watching this far, and I'll see you all next week.